On behalf of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory, we are delighted to welcome you to our fall program on chili peppers. I'm Sue Boyer, Board President of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory. I'm filling in for our usual moderator, very well-spoken Judy Clem, our Executive Director, who's just going to be able to sit back and enjoy a program for a change. As part of the Friends of mission, we want to help educate and inspire gardeners to become more confident in their endeavors. To that end, this month, we are hosting this program, as well as one on November 3rd, about the native pawpaw tree, an ancient fruit-producing tree that, interestingly enough, is not well known to many of us. In fact, I thought pawpaws were peppers, but they are not. Remember also that all of our programs are recorded and can be found at our website, fopcon.org. And for those who are not members, I do want to remind you that if you are not a member, you might want to consider becoming one. It enables you to take advantage of our early online shopping for our annual May plant sale, allowing you to choose what you want before it sells out. Also, you are able to become part of the American Horticulture Society's reciprocal admissions program. This program offers free admission to and additional benefits at over 350 gardens throughout North America, including our own Chicago Botanical Garden up north. Before we begin, I want to remind you that you'll be muted during the presentation to avoid disruptive background noise. If there is time, we will unmute the group for conversation at the end of the presentation. Casey Nicolau will serve as our co-host and handle the Q&A at the conclusion of the program. Please send all your questions into the chat as soon as you can to help Casey keep us on track. Now, I'd like to introduce our special guest this evening, Dr. Stephanie Walker, who is the Extension Vegetable Specialist and Professor in the Extension Plant Science Department at New Mexico State University in Las Cruces. Her research focuses on trialing and identifying vegetable cultivars, and production practices optimum for New Mexico chili producers. She also serves as co-chair of the Chile Pepper Institute. I recently discovered via Cooks Illustrated that Chile Pepper Institute has further developed a heat profile beyond the Scoville rating that most of us know about that gives us even more depth information about the kinds of chilies that we are using. So at this point now, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stephanie Walker, and welcome to Illinois. Are we all set there?
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry, I was muted.
Certainly can.
Okay, excellent. So yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Stephanie Walker, and I'm very pleased to be talking about my favorite topic tonight, chili peppers. I am surrounded by dogs here, so I may have to kick them out. Usually they distract me more if they're scratching at the door. So I apologize if you see me pushing away my furry friends here. So I am now the co-director of the Chile Pepper Institute. And so when this organization reached out to us, I happily agreed to talk about chilies. Okay. Okay, so chili peppers are a member of the nightshade family, the Solanaceous family. So we have the close relatives, tomatoes, eggplants, and potatoes. The genus for chili peppers is capsicum, and there are 38 wild species, mostly found in South America. And we have 5 species that have been domesticated by humans, including Capsicum annuum, frutescens, chinense, bacatum, and pubescens. Now, chili peppers are truly one of the New World crops. The greatest concentration of wild species can currently be found where they originated there, around the border of Bolivia and Brazil. And of course, with wild peppers today and historically, birds have been the perfect complement to spreading chili pepper seed. So wild chili peppers typically have very, very small fruit. At the red, physiologically mature stage, these fruit detach very easily from the plant. So the birds see these beautiful red fruit, they eat them, they fly off. The seed is not herded through the digestive tract, so the birds can go deposit seed wherever they fly. And another great symbiotic relationship point is that birds don't feel the heat. So the heat was developed to prevent mammals from chewing on the chili peppers, but for birds, they don't care about the heat. It doesn't bother them at all. So before chili peppers are domesticated, human beings, started harvesting the fruit from wild plants that they find. And, very early on, humans discovered the medicinal properties of chili peppers. Mayans used them to treat asthma, coughs, and sore throats. Aztecs would put a little bit of that chili pepper to help treat toothaches. And in general, they realized that chili peppers had pain-relieving properties. And of course, we use that now. You get a numbing effect from the capsaicin in chili peppers, as well as when you eat that hot chili pepper, your body naturally makes endorphins to just make you feel really good. So there's many medicinal reasons for eating chili peppers. Now, chili peppers were one of the earliest domesticated crops in the Americas. Native Americans began to select plants that had larger fruit, or fruit that they liked the flavor better or the color of the fruit. So over the human history, chili peppers were domesticated at least 5 different times, particularly in South and Middle America. The oldest evidence of the human beings actually working to domesticate chili peppers was in the Tehuacan Valley of South Central Mexico. Now, of course, when humans got involved with this, they started selecting chili peppers that had larger fruit, fruit that once they turned red, they would stay on the plant tighter, and the fruit would start, because of their size, they would start pointing down instead of pointing up. So obviously, it's a lot harder for a bird to grab a hold of this big fruit that's pointing down and tightly attached to the plant. So after humans got involved in domesticating chili peppers, birds could no longer readily spread the seed, and so chili peppers became intertwined with humans, and then humans picked up the banner to spread chili pepper seeds. So how did capsicum spread to the Old World? Well, many of us, of course, do know the story of Christopher Columbus. This was one thing he did. He came to the New World looking for black pepper. And of course, he thought he was in India. He misnamed the Native Americans as Indians, and he also misnamed the chili pepper that he ate as a pepper because he thought it was red pepper. So he first discovered chili peppers on New Year's Day, 1493. And of course, Christopher Columbus was also a great marketer. And so he immediately said, hey, the pepper which these local Indians are using is a lot better than black pepper. So he took this back to the Old World and quickly, spread the bounty of this wonderful find he had. And of course, he called it red pepper. So chili peppers have been misnamed somewhat peppers ever since. Once chili peppers got to the Old World, it moved quickly through Europe and Asia. Back in the late 15th century, the diet in Europe was terrible, bland, dreadful. This is one of the reasons explorers went in search of pepper and other spices, was they needed to kind of jazz up their food a little bit. So it was quickly embraced by many countries in the Old World. Marcher Angari said that the Caucasian pepper, was better. You didn't need regular pepper if you had this red pepper, this chili pepper. So by the late 16th century, chili peppers were found throughout the tropics and subtropics. Many of these countries just can't believe that chilies weren't always there because they've become such an integral part of their cuisine. But really, even though we do grow and produce a lot of chili peppers here in the United States, we're actually only 5th. China, Mexico, Turkey, and Indonesia all produce more chili pepper than we do. But this is a somewhat dated statistic, but chili pepper production has just grown since 2017. But in that year, chili pepper trade was worth more than coffee or tea. So this is how much it's hit the human diet and been so embraced throughout the world. So chili pepper consumption continues to rise in both the US and worldwide. Our production has pretty much stabilized here in the United States, and in many cases, we've lost some production to other countries, but we can't get enough of it. Our consumption here in the United States keeps increasing. And of course, we know why. It's like, well, currently 1/4 of the adults on Earth eat chili peppers every day. I know I'm one, I eat it practically every meal. And of course, chili peppers add great flavor to many foods. And as we all know, chili peppers are a good addiction. There's many things that humans get addicted to that do us harm. But with chili peppers, when you eat them, it hurts you. It causes your brain to release these pleasure-making chemicals, the endorphins. And so in that way, chili peppers actually have an addictive property. So when you kind of start eating chili peppers, many people will increase the heat level they can tolerate and just want to eat this more and more. And it's great because chili peppers are an extremely healthful component of a diet. So let's talk about some of the special properties of our capsicum, which when I say capsicum, I'm talking about chili peppers, of course. We know chili peppers come in a wide variety of colors. And the color of the chili pepper depends on the predominant pigment that's present. And many of these colorful pigments, they're carotenoid, anthocyanin pigments that greatly contribute to the high nutritional value of chili peppers. So you always hear eat a colorful diet. It's very true. These colorful chili peppers are very helpful for us. For instance, many people may not realize that green chili, a New Mexico type green chili, one of them has as much vitamin C as 6 oranges. And of course, oranges are thought for being known for being high in vitamin C. Well, green chili peppers beat it. Once the chili peppers turn red, very, very high in carotenoids, provitamin A. So 1 teaspoon of red chili gives you your daily requirement for vitamin A. In particular, the red colors that we see in ripe red types of chili peppers come from 2 very unique pigments that we really only see these in red chili. And that's capsanthin, which is a bright brick red pigment, and capsarubin, which is a deep brownish red pigment. And these red pigments can actually be extracted to produce oleoresin paprika. We actually have a plant here outside of Las Cruces. It's one of the manufacturing plants in the United States that actually takes paprika, extracts these beautiful red pigments, and then it's actually sold as a natural food colorant. So if you eat pepperoni, nacho cheese, Doritos, other products that either will say natural red food coloring or paprika, it's actually paprika that's being used to color that product. And I have a picture of flamingos there. Paul Boslin, our recently retired chili pepper breeder, discovered from some folks that worked at a zoo that in zoos, they'll actually feed flamingos paprika, red chili, because they're no longer getting their natural diet of plankton that has carotenoids in it, so that their plumage goes white unless they eat this chili pepper that keeps them a nice pinkish color. So pungency, or the heat of chili peppers, is another characteristic that chili peppers are famous for. It's reported in Scoville heat units, which is actually named by this gentleman pictured, Wilbur Scoville. He was a pharmacist, and around the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, he realized that he needed a good way to measure and compare the heat of different types of chili peppers. So what he developed was a system of human tasters. He would have 5 trained tasters. He'd get a mixture of pure ground chilies, put those in a cereal dilution, and then determine at what dilution the tasters could no longer taste the heat. Well, that's obviously, that's kind of hard to do, to get tasters. And of course, they're going to burn out their taste buds if they do too much chili tasting. So currently, we actually use HPLC, or high performance liquid chromatography. This is a scientific method where we can actually measure not just the amount of capsaicin, but also the other closely related capsaicin chemicals. How much is there, what type, to determine how hot a particular pepper is. So chili heat is imparted by capsaicin and 5 other closely related chemicals. Capsaicin is an alkaline, oily chemical. So if you eat something really hot and you want to get that heat out of your mouth, keep in mind that it's oily. So you need to drink or eat something that is going to dissolve oils. So water really just spreads it around. You really want something like milk or ice cream, some type of fat that will dissipate that oil. Capsaicin is only produced in members of the capsicum genus. So this is another, along with those 2 red pigments I mentioned, very specific. And many people incorrectly think that seeds are the hottest part of a chili pepper. That's actually not true. The seeds themselves do not contain any capsaicin. The capsaicin is actually produced in the vesicles on the veins of the chilies. So if you open up a chili pepper and see a bright yellow thick vein, that usually indicates that's a very, very hot chili pepper. And actually, if you have an undamaged chili pepper and you see that very tip below where the placenta or the veins travel to, if you just bite off that tip, you can get the flavor, but you won't get the heat. And they always say, then you give the second bite to your friend to find out how hot it was. So something to keep in mind, of course, make sure it's not crushed, or if the capsaicin has a chance to dissipate. And as gardeners, it is very true that the heat level in chili pepper fruit will increase if those plants are grown under stressful conditions. So by stress, it could be heat, it could be wind, it could be drought stress. Anything that's actually putting hardship on those plants causes it to produce more of these capsaicins, because this is a natural defensive mechanism that the chili plants have evolved. So we often say here in New Mexico, it's one of the reasons why we produce really flavorful hot chili, because we have very stressful growing conditions here in southern New Mexico. So here's just a quick heat scale. We know bell peppers or chili peppers, they genetically cannot produce capsaicin, so there's 0 Scoville heat units. A typical New Mexico type, about 700 to a very hot one at 10,000 Scoville heat units. And this is all the way up to habaneros, which are a different species, chinense, at 300,000 Scoville heat units. But of course, today we have some that are much hotter, which I'll discuss here shortly. Just quickly, I don't go into the flavor profiles that were recently published that Sue referred to at the beginning of my talk, but I will say that these capsaicin chemicals, depending on the type and the quantity a certain chili pepper variety has, it will give you different mouthfeel and a different sensation when you eat the peppers. For instance, for New Mexico peppers, jalapeno peppers, they mostly have capsaicin, the most common capsaicinoid chemical. And capsaicin gives you a rapid, pungent sensation near the back of your throat. It comes in really quick. Homocapsaicin is a longer, low-intensity heat, kind of mid-mouth, and it kind of numbs your palate. Nordihydrocapsaicin is less irritating. It actually gives you this pleasant warming effect. So different types of chili peppers are going to have different quantities of these different capsaicins, and that is going to affect how you actually perceive these chili peppers when you eat them. So for chili peppers, the scientific name, it's in the family Solanaceae, the genus capsicum, the species, in this case, this is actually a picture of New Mex garnet, a red chili, a paprika type we released some years ago. So obviously the genus and species is going to be italicized. And the cultivar name, in this case, if you see a New Mex before the variety, that means it was actually released by the New Mexico State University chili breeding program. So in this case, this is Capsicum annuum, New Mex garnet. As I mentioned earlier, there's 5 domesticated species, annuum, frutescens, chinense, bacatum, and pubescens. Capsicum frutescens. Frutescens means shrubby or bushy, and this is a picture of a typical Tabasco plant here. And if you love Tabasco sauce, this is actually the species of fruit that's used to make that fermented sauce that we know and love as Tabasco sauce. Capsicum frutescens is commonly found in the wild areas around the Amazon basin these days. Plants about 1 to 4 feet high, depending on the climate, and they usually have a fairly high heat. So compared to an annuum that maybe 10,000 would be a hot one, maybe a 25, 50,000. These are more in the high range. The immature fruit typically start as yellow and turn yellow to green and then ripen to red. And here's just a few of the Capsicum frutescens varieties. A Capsicum frutescens grows very well in most parts of the United States. We have the green leaf Tabasco, which is the classic variety used to make Tabasco sauce. That actually was a long breeding process by a man named Greenleaf, who did a cross-species cross with the Chinense to actually get virus resistance in his Tabasco plants. Malahueta is very popular in northeastern Brazil, and Siling Laboyo translates to wild chili, very, very popular in the Philippines. Capsicum chinense is another domesticated species. It means from China, and this is a misnomer because chili peppers, despite what many local people may think, did not come from China. So this was actually a mistake by the taxonomists when they called it chinense. But it's a very, very popular chili pepper in the Caribbean. There's many different fruit shapes and colors. And Capsicum chinense is the species that does have some of the hottest varieties. It does have the hottest varieties known. Some varieties include New Mex Suave Gold and Suave Red, two releases from New Mexico State University that were actually developed to have that delicious fruity taste of habaneros, but with a much reduced heat level. Chocolate habanero, the orange habanero, other very, very hot classic habanero types, about 300,000 Scoville heat units. A daddle is a landrace that's known in Florida, St. Augustine area. And Scotch bonnet, another very hot one that's popular in Jamaica. And of course, this is also where we have the infamous ghost pepper, Buchalokia. So back when New Mexico State University discovered, standardized, and released this landrace that originated in India, it was 1.5, in excess of 1.5 million Scoville heat units. So this is compared to 300,000 for a very, very hot habanero. So it did get the Guinness Book of World Records in 2007 as being the hottest pepper ever. Well, there's breeders out there who are just really trying to get an even hotter pepper. So in 2012, Trinidad Moruga Scorpion took over the mantle of being the hottest pepper ever. And Trinidad Moruga Scorpion was actually dethroned by Carolina Reaper in 2013 at over 2.5 million Scoville heat units. So I recently read that there's another one that's supposed to be even hotter, but it hasn't been independently verified in replicated trials. These guys have. So very, very hot. A little bit will do you, that's for sure. Another species, Capsicum baccatum. This is another one that does very well. It grows well in most of the United States, but it hasn't been well discovered here in the United States. This is really the pepper that's the most popular down in South America, where it's called the ají. Capsicum baccatum can be distinguished because there's spots on the corolla of the flower. You can kind of see the brownish spots there on the petals. And Capsicum baccatum peppers have a very intense aroma and flavor. I've heard many people think that this is going to be like the next vegetable that's going to take the United States by storm. It hasn't quite happened yet, but it certainly still could. So Capsicum baccatum was domesticated a long time ago, and it was improved by pre-Incan civilizations. As with annuum and chinense, there's a wide variety in fruit shapes and colors. And the baccatum plants, if they're grown in a place where it doesn't freeze, they can actually grow into very, very large tree-like plants. Some of the baccatum varieties include Ahia amarillo, which is a very common favored variety down in Peru. And it is the classic chili pepper that's used to make ceviche, marinated raw fish dish. Ají limon and Christmas bell are two other very popular capsicum bacatum varieties. Capsicum pubescens, the fourth of the domesticated species. Pubescens means hairy, and if you see the leaves there, it's aptly named. It's also called rocoto. It's grown extensively in Mexico and Peru, but it's kind of rare elsewhere. It can be easily distinguished because it has beautiful purple flowers and black seeds. You get these, beautiful, bright red, bright yellow fruit with an internal black seed. And these fruits combine that high heat level with a nice succulent bell pepper. So it's kind of like having a really hot bell pepper, which they really love in the countries that they grow these. These plants often grow very, very tall, up to 30 feet, and can live up to 10 years in areas where there's not frost. It does require a very, very long frost-free growing season. So in the United States, for the most part, we don't have the right conditions to grow these. If you want to grow pubescens and actually get some fruit off of them, you really have to start them in pots and then transplant them into the garden the second year in order to have a long enough period to actually get some fruit set on them. Some of the pubescens varieties are the Canario, Manzano, apple-shaped, so Manzano's Spanish for apple, and the Perón, pear-shaped with yellow fruit. And this leads us, of course, to the most widespread of species, which is the Capsicum annuum. And this includes bell peppers, jalapenos, New Mexico types. And throughout the world, it is the most commonly grown chili pepper type. So one of the Capsicum annuum varieties is the Ancho and Poblano. So Ancho is the dried red, ripe, heart-shaped fruit. The poblanas are the immature or dark green fruit. And if you hear the term mulatto, it refers to the dark brown mature fruit types. And we were discussing before this meeting began that this is the classic type of pepper in Mexico to use for chili rellenos. Here in New Mexico, we like New Mexico types, but anchos make delicious, wonderful chili rellenos. Over in Asia, there's many types of Asian peppers. They are huge consumers, huge producers of chili peppers. We have the shishito, which is a relatively mild peppers, a relatively small, 3 to 4 inches. The santaka, which does have erect fruit that grows straight up on the plants that are much hotter, a little more hot than a very hot jalapeno. And then the Thai chili, small, very hot fruit. Padron peppers are an heirloom from Spain. So these are some that settled in Europe, and they're usually harvested when they're immature. So they're still green. It's the immature, non-physiological mature color. And over there, it's great fun to fry up a pot of these and sauteed in olive oil and salted. And about 1 out of every 20 fruit is hot. So you're there with your friends and eating these peppers. It's like, oh, who's going to get the hot one? So it's kind of part of the fun of eating these peppers. Bell peppers, though, of course, these are also in the Capsicum annuum species, and they are the most commonly grown peppers with hundreds of thousands of acres worldwide. These are the 4 or 3-lobed, genetically non-pungent fruits. So there's actually a recessive gene in bell peppers that prevents them from making capsaicin. Green bell peppers are physiologically immature. Then the colored bell peppers are once those fruit start to mature. And especially the colored bell peppers are very susceptible to sun scald. So commercially, they're often grown under shade to keep those very valuable colored bell peppers safe. Cayenne peppers, we do have some cayenne pepper production here commercially in New Mexico. Cayenne peppers really took off when hot wings became popular, because this is the pepper for the most part that's used to make the sauce that makes the hot wings. They're also used in Cajun cooking, fermented hot sauces. Like if you like Louisiana hot sauce, that's actually made with fermented cayenne peppers. They're quite hot. A couple of popular varieties are large red thick and Mesilla. Jalapeno peppers. So jalapeno peppers are very popular. In Mexico, they like having the growth cracks, we call it corkiness of the netting in the fruits. Here in the United States, most customers prefer to have them smooth. Early jalapeno was actually released by Texas A&M University many years ago. It's a great open pollinate jalapeno. New Mexico State University recently released New Mex lemon spice, and this was actually developed for its yellow color. It's a very, very hot, very, very delicious jalapeno. In fact, it receives rave reviews anywhere it's grown. If you like chipotle, chipotle is basically red ripe smoked jalapeno. Chiltepines also are capsicum annuums. These are those very direct descendants of those wild chili peppers I talked about at the beginning of my talk. So they're very small, about a 1/4-inch diameter, very, very hot. It can be hard to germinate these seeds if you start it yourself. In nature, these seeds are actually scarified by going through birds' digestive tracts. So that really helps with their germination in the wild. And here in the United States, we can still find wild chiltepine plants in southern Arizona and southern Texas where they don't typically freeze. We also have ornamental chili peppers. New Mexico State University, the Chile Pepper Institute has released many, many ornamental chili peppers. I think we have one for every holiday on the calendar right now. Some of the favorites are New Mex Christmas, New Mex Twilight, New Mex Easter. These are edible. All parts of a capsicum chili plant is edible. However, they weren't bred for flavor. So for the most part, they're very, very hot and don't necessarily taste very good. So being from New Mexico, from the Chile Pepper Institute, I'm going to discuss chilies in New Mexico here a bit. Here in New Mexico, we're very proud that we are the largest producer of chili peppers. And when I talk about chili peppers, I'm referring to chilies that have pungency. So for bell peppers, California, Florida grow more bell peppers, but for hot peppers, New Mexico is #1 in the United States. And chili peppers are deeply entwined with the cultural and historical heritage of this region. Chilies were proclaimed the state vegetable here in 1965, and we're actually one of the few states that has an official state question, so red or green, which if you come to New Mexico for a visit, that's what they're going to ask you when you order your enchiladas, your food at lunch. If you like both, then you ask for Christmas. So anyway, that's our official state question. And really, chili peppers have been cultivated in this region for well over 400 years. So they really have deep historic roots in this part of the world. So according to Spanish written records, when Spanish explorers first came to what is now New Mexico, they kept written records indicating that they had introduced seed up and down the Rio Grande Valley. We haven't really definitively determined whether or not Native American tribes already had chili seed that was traded up and down. We just know that when the Spanish came in the late 1400s, 1500s, they actually wrote down and said, yeah, we brought chili seed and left it with the local villagers. So Baltasar Obregon, they have no chili, but the natives were given some seed to plant. And even in 1601, chili peppers were not officially on the list of Native American crops. But once again, Native Americans here, many of the Spanish communities really feel that they had chili seed here before the Spanish came. So it's a bit of a debate here in New Mexico. But because of this seed that was introduced around New Mexico, all the way up, into Colorado, we actually have native New Mexican land-raised chili. We also refer to it as native chili here in New Mexico. And it really is renowned for its excellent flavor. The fruit tend to be shorter, thin-walled. It tends to be medium to very hot, but it's amazing genetics because they're land races that have been adapted to northern New Mexico. It's a very quick period from germination to fruit maturity. And so, as a breeder, it's just amazing material to work with. One of the most famous is Chimayo, that's grown in the Chimayo city, a small city north of Santa Fe. And that is a very beloved New Mexico land-raised chili. So you all probably know, since you're part of this this group, but just a quick definition in case you don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about landrace. So in general, a cultivar is a variety that's been stabilized, bred for select characteristics, or hybrids that have been released within the last 50 years. Heirlooms typically have been community grown, community saved, and they've typically been handed down for about 50 to 100 years. We all know, we have our very famous heirloom tomatoes, and many of our New Mexico chili types are now heirlooms as well. Land races, however, were adapted to a localized environment of area for more than 100 years. So those New Mex landrace chilies have been, because through seed saving, they've been well adapted to these shorter growing areas, growing seasons in northern New Mexico. So for the most part, most families collect and store their own seed. And so basically, by saving all the seed off the physiologically mature red fruit, you know that you are selecting those that produce red fruit the quickest year after year, and also withstood any environmental stresses in the growing area. We have looked at these at New Mexico State University, and unfortunately, we found that many of the land races that are grown are very genetically mixed. And unfortunately, over the years, many farmers didn't realize that chili pepper plants easily cross-pollinate. If you have a jalapeno plant and a bell pepper plant, they're both the same species, Capsicum annuum. If you have them growing together in your garden, bees and other pollinators are going to cross-pollinate those. And if you save seed, then you're going to end up with jalapeno bell pepper mixtures. Unfortunately, when bell peppers and jalapenos were introduced into northern New Mexico, the growers didn't realize that. So we got a lot of stray genetics in there that many of our growers in northern New Mexico are working to sort out now and get back to the original landrace type for their community. Now, for our famous New Mexico type chili, however, this actually came about when Fabian Garcia, who was in the first graduating class and was the first head of the Ag Science Center at the New Mexico School of Agriculture and Mechanical Arts. It's now New Mexico State University. And he realized that he had all these random chili land races growing. And he thought, you know what, if we could get a predictable chili fruit, perhaps a slightly lower heat, something easier for consumers to work with, I could really have something here. So he actually, through selective breeding work, developed New Mexico #9. And this was the very first New Mexico type chili pepper. And I will say, New Mexico chili type is often incorrectly referred to as Anaheim. So I'm going to put this out there right now. It's one of my, it always throws me for a loop when I read a seed catalog, a seed catalog that I have great respect for, I've gotten great seed for, but then they call our New Mexico chili Anaheim type. The only reason it's known as Anaheim is because back when Fabian Garcia was doing his work, he was visited by a gentleman named Gilberto Ortega, loved the chili work, loved the chili, took some of the seed with him back to California, and actually started his own breeding program and his own company, Ortega Canning, where he developed the Anaheim varieties. So I always like to say, really, Anaheim chilies are a New Mexico type chili. So that's my 2 cents there. New Mexico type chili is also often called Hatch chili. And that's actually because of the community of Hatch, which is a small community about 30 minutes north of Las Cruces in the Rio Grande Valley. And there was a gentleman named Joseph Franzoy who began growing. He was looking for something to grow. And so it took him a little while, but he warmed up to chili peppers. They grew very well. They had great water from the Rio Grande. And today, Franzoy's descendants, along with other producers in the area, continue to grow and market excellent red and green New Mexico type chili. And they really put Hatch chili on the map when they started the Hatch Chili Festival. That was first held in 1971, and it's held every Labor Day weekend, except for 2020. It was canceled for the first time because of the pandemic. Roy Nakayama, he was one of our chili breeders. So we've had chili breeders at New Mexico State University since Fabian Garcia's time in the late 1800s. So Roy Nakayama was another prominent chili breeder who really wanted to develop, more consistent shape and heat level. So he actually worked with the Lytles, which is descendants of Franzoy, farming family at Hatch, to develop New Mex Big Jim. He also released Espanola Improved, two very popular New Mexico type green chilies. At the time, New Mexico 6-4 was the main variety grown, but years of seed saving without the isolation, once again, chili peppers will cross-pollinate. It had become quite variable. So they actually, through selective breeding, developed Big Jim that is this beautiful, large, great chili pepper for rellenos. And it actually does hold the world record for the largest green chili fruit. Espanola Improved was actually released by Nakayama and Frank Mata, his colleague, in 1984, that he actually took Sandia, which is a New Mexico type, crossed it with one of those amazing early maturing New Mexico land races, and developed a more early maturing New Mexico type chili. And this variety actually had a recent fame because it was grown on the International Space Station, and the astronauts up there just raved. They were so excited to be able to eat freshly grown chili on their space station. So we have a lot of requests now for Espanola Improved seed. Dr. Paul Bosin is another one of our famous breeders who founded the Chile Pepper Institute. He actually retired in 2018. That wasn't his, he didn't pass away. That's when he retired. And he also released many popular New Mexico type chili cultivars. The Chile Pepper Institute is housed at New Mexico State University. It's the only international nonprofit organization devoted to educational research related to capsicum. We do provide sales of the New Mexico type chilies and many other more unusual chili pepper types. We also host a teaching garden every year. So if you want to come to Las Cruces between May and November, you can actually do a self-guided tour to look at these hundreds of varieties of chili peppers from around the world. And I think, I guess you want me to finish. I have a little bit more about mechanical harvest, but I can kind of skip through it if you want to have a question and answer. Yeah, I guess I'll go through this. Just so in New Mexico, we do have red and green chili industries. Our red chili and paprika, most of it's dried. It's prized for its high pigment, its high red pigments, its ease of dry and low heat levels. And of course, throughout the world, usually red chili is grown on ditch banks. And historically in New Mexico, it's been dried on ditch banks or on ristras, but because of phytosanitary challenges, we now do have commercial scale dryers to keep that red chili clean and safe. The New Mexico green chili is harvested when it's fully sized but physiologically immature, so the seed in green chili will not be viable. It's steam peeled, frozen or canned, whole or diced. Green chili is still 100% harvested, although it has been one of my big research areas to mechanize our green chili because we are losing acreage to Mexico. We really want to keep that production in the United States. And as with any fruit or vegetable that has a large labor requirement, to keep production in the United States, we have to figure out ways to mechanize these crops. So we have had challenges with green chili because if it breaks, it doesn't make a good relleno, it ruins the quality. So I'm very proud to say that in 2020, we released New Mex Odyssey. It was the first New Mexico type green chili developed specifically for mechanical harvest efficiency. And that's, you can see the fruit, they're set high off the ground. They come off the plant quite easily when they're harvested. And I think currently this is my favorite green chili variety. We have back in 2012 established a Chili Labeling Act. We're trying to get the awareness of the quality. If you buy New Mexico grown chili, you are buying something that's a very special crop, and we want to make sure that producers are recognized for that. So with that, and it's got dark here in my room too. The sun has gone down. So let me turn on the lights. Okay, so that was a really quick overview of chili peppers. Are there any questions or discussion?
Perfect. No, thank you so much, Dr. Walker, Stephanie, for an excellent and comprehensive presentation. We are so fortunate to learn from you this evening and just appreciate you taking it. and sharing your knowledge. So
Of course, my pleasure.
yeah, thank you so much. I've been monitoring the chat for questions. We just have one so far. So folks, just a reminder, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in now, and we'll be happy to ask those to Stephanie here. Judy did have one question. That is a great question. So she has shishitos. That's always hard for me to say, that are turning red and are still on the vine. Will they be spicier if she eats them, or should she save the seeds now that they're red?
So with heat, I didn't mention this, but I'm often asked, so what's hotter, green or red? And really, it depends on, well, I already mentioned, so genetics and environment will impact how hot something is. But typically with the chili, when they get to that breaker stage, when they're just starting to turn to the ripe color, that's when they're hottest. And they don't really get hotter than that unless they dehydrate and you concentrate those capsaicins. So it kind of depends if she wants to eat them now. She can certainly save seed. Just keep in mind, if she's growing any other capsicum annuum varieties, there could have been cross-pollination, so the seed may not grow out to be true shishitos here in a couple generations.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you so much for that helpful answer. Appreciate it. We have a couple new questions in the chat. So can you grow New Mexico peppers in our climate here in Illinois?
I would say yes, you can, but you need to start them inside as transplants. So if you're just going to grow them to the green stage, you start with transplants. Yeah, and in less than 3 months, you can get green peppers. So absolutely. I will say though, you probably have much nicer soil, much more mellow growing conditions. So they may not be as spicy if you grow them in Illinois, but you can certainly grow them. For red chili, if you're direct seeding, that would be more of a challenge. I would definitely suggest you do some kind of season extension technique in that case.
Great. Thank you for that. And then let's see. So Elizabeth had a question here in the chat. So she recently read that you can overwinter peppers and keep the same plants for the next year to produce better flavor. Is there any merit to that?
Yeah, so we talk about capsicum annuum, which means annual. Actually peppers are perennials. If they never freeze, that they'll keep growing if they don't get a disease or something else takes them down. So I don't necessarily know that the flavor would be better, but you can certainly overwinter chili plants and put them outside again. Yeah, as long as they don't freeze and don't have disease issues, you can keep them going. And if you're really good at that, maybe you can end up with one of those 30 feet pubescent trees, chili trees. That's the type of thing I always try, that I always regret it when I'm babying a chili tree inside all winter.
Funny. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Let's see. Okay, so this, I think, is a question that just came in from Kathleen. It's a little longer. So Kathleen grew padron. I'm saying that. Padron this year, and all the fruit turned out very hot. This was not the case with the shishitos that she grew. Could the high heat we experienced this summer be the reason why the padrons were so hot?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, normally padrones, when they're grown, it's usually under less stressful conditions. We know that they will produce capsaicins, and all the chili peppers, if they genetically can produce the capsaicins, they'll produce more under stress. Yeah, I'm not sure why your shishitos weren't hotter, but like I said, it's always this complicated interaction between the genetics and the environmental conditions. And that's why it drives processors crazy when you're trying to get a predictable product that you want to label as medium. And I dealt with this quite a while I worked in industry, and now manufacturers for the most part will actually just adjust the heat level of products with oleoresin capsaicin, which is kind of like the oleoresin paprika color, but it's the pure extracted capsaicin that you can just add just the amount of pinch you need to get that salsa to the heat level that you wish.
Perfect. Thank you. And Kathleen, I hope that answered your question, but if you have any follow-ups, please do let us know. Are chilies more popular in hotter climates?
Yes, there does seem to be that trend. So India, the tropical countries, and I know it's not my area of study, but I know anthropologists and others have looked at that maybe, when you eat chili, it makes you sweat. It may help you, dissipate heat better. But there is absolutely that trend worldwide that, yeah, the hotter climates close to the equator have embraced chilies. Those up in the northern realms, it's taken them longer to embrace chili peppers.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And it seems like most of the spicy food that I like, I know is from hotter climates. So that definitely tracks. Valerie here asked if you could provide some guidelines for fertilizing.
Okay, yes, for fertilizing. So, basically a well-balanced fertilizer. I know here in New Mexico, we have a lot of potassium in our soil, but you want to have a good start with phosphorus. We'll usually give them a little bit of starter nitrogen and then kind of trickle it out. The main time you need to, the most critical time for fertilizing your peppers is when they're setting fruit. So a little bit at the start, and then when they're starting to set those fruit, that's when you need to give them a good dose of nitrogen. And chili peppers aren't quite as bad as tomatoes in having just vegetative growth if they have too much nitrogen, but you can see that a little bit. So you don't want to overly fertilize with nitrogen early in the season. And actually the chili plants don't need it at that point.
Sure.
Yeah, and actually, I should point out, we have a lot of extension publications on a lot of areas of producing chili peppers. So, feel free to go to the New Mexico State University and, type in the keyword chili, and there's a lot of extension guides and circulars.
Yeah, great suggestion. So folks on the line, if you're interested, definitely take a look there. And then let's see. Okay, so Toby here is wondering if you could talk about your favorite pepper as well as the most challenging pepper that you've ever grown.
Okay, well, like as I said, so I'm definitely biased. So New Mex Odyssey, it's a mechanically harvestable variety, but it has a great flavor. And actually, when we first started working on that, we were really looking at something that was easier to hand remove from the plants. And inadvertently, we came across something that worked really good with machines. Let's see, the most challenging. Yeah, I mean, we certainly have a lot that, it's just it's like the chiltepines, it's just hard to get them to germinate because they need that scarification. And so we're not feeding them to birds. So, with some of them, we do have to put them through some treatment to get good germ off of them. I know I'm going to kick myself because I'm going to think of some horror story in growing chili peppers, but no, I can't really think of any that were particularly hard. It's more that some of the wild species are more challenging, of course, as you'd expect.
Definitely, that makes sense. And then let's see. So Gail here, so she wondered, is it true in New Mexico when you pick red versus green for food, you can't rely on one being hotter than the other because the heat level can be different from year to year?
Right, absolutely. That, and it's also the variety. So, I mean, you can have a very mild green variety, a very hot green variety, and same with red. So it really depends on what the cultivar, as well as the environmental conditions that year. So you really have to ask the server, and they'll usually tell you, today the green's hotter, today the red is hot. So, and it kind of, because I work in this area, I wish people were more familiar with the actual variety names. It always just, we just say mild versus hot, when actually, different chili varieties, have very unique flavor profiles, which we touched on a little bit based on the types of capsaicins and the quantities of capsaicinoid chemicals they have. So even here in New Mexico, you'll see the mild bin and the hot bin. It's like, I want to know, is this Sandia? Is this Big Jim? Is this 6-4? And hopefully now is this New Mex Odyssey.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing that one too, definitely. And then let's see. So Judy mentioned that the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory will offer La Bamba, which is a hot chili pepper variety for the next year's plant sale. Are you familiar with this variety?
No, I haven't heard of that one. I don't know, Judy, if you could comment on it. Who sells the seed, or what part of the year it's from? What part of the world it's from?
I think Judy's getting off mute here.
I will, yeah, sorry. I'm gonna look up who we're buying the seed from while we're talking. But I don't know anything more other than it's coming from Germania
Uh-huh.
Seed Company. So I don't know anything more about it. I don't have the brochure on it, but I just know that it just got added to the plant sale this year. So
Well, it's a great name.
I'm assuming it's gonna be spicy.
Perfect. And then we just have one more question in the chat, and perhaps unless there's anything else, that could be our final question of the evening. But so Kathleen here mentions that she still has some bell peppers growing with fruit still forming, but it's starting to slow down. So is there an outside temperature at which the pepper will just not develop any further?
Yeah, so if the fruit are already set, and we do have that pollination temperature range, so fruit are not going to really set at the temperatures, certainly below 60. As long as it doesn't freeze, they'll probably continue to very, very slowly develop. As soon as you get a freeze or frost, it's going to stop. And we find that once you hit 27, the plants are going to die. So yeah, unless you have some way to really cover them up and do that season extension, unless you're really close to having them ready to pick, you might not make it up in your part of the country, I'm afraid. I know we're actually cooling down here too, so we're kind of on the freeze alert here in the next few weeks as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So I guess, folks, unless there's any other questions here, I'll pass back to you, Sue, to wrap us up.
Okay. Well, this has been a wonderful presentation. We've really enjoyed all the information that you've given us today. Some very practical things like the seeds are really not the hottest part, but also all these different varieties. If you had one that you thought we should offer at our plant sale, which one would you pick?
You might want to try the Espanola Improved. Like I said, it's really having a moment right now since it has the space station fame, and it really is a New Mexico type that has an earlier maturity. So you'll get green fruit off of it earlier, and it has a medium to hottish heat. So it is a bit spicy, but yeah, it definitely has great New Mexican flavor, and I think it would do well. And also, I'm sorry, I have to say also lemon, if you want jalapenos, the New Mex lemon spice.
Jalapeno.
Yeah, New Mex lemon spice. There's also orange spice, and I'm forgetting the other one now, my apologies. But the lemon spice in particular has been really embraced because of its great flavor and productivity. And I know that would do great in Illinois.
Are these seeds available through your university, or are there suppliers out there that?
Yeah, I know a few seed companies are carrying lemon spice now. I've seen it in several seed catalogs. You can get them from the Chile Pepper Institute store. I mean, I will say in advance, our seed are a little bit more expensive. Keep in mind, we're a nonprofit. We're completely self-funded. We actually have
we know about that.
Yeah, so that's why. So I apologize when people say, how come your seed is so expensive? That's why. Espanola Improved. I don't know if other seed companies are carrying it. They may, now that it has the space station fame, they may start, but you can certainly get both of the varieties at the Chile Pepper Institute store.
Well, thank you very much for sharing all this information with us. That's been really a wealth of knowledge that we didn't know a lot about. So we're glad that you were able to come tonight.